The shrill whine of power tools cut through the quiet of my Saturday morning as the construction team continued work on my front porch. I had just stepped outside with a tray of coffee for the crew when I heard it, the unmistakable sharp rhythm of designer heels striking pavement, followed by an offended gasp that could only belong to one woman. What in the name of property values is going on here? The voice sliced through the air like a dull blade on steel. There stood Patricia Drummond, president of our homeowners association, gripping her clipboard like a weapon. She stormed up my driveway, her complexion deepening in red with every stride. "Stop this construction immediately," she barked at the workers, who looked at me for direction. "This is an unauthorized alteration. Cannot build this monstrosity without HOA approval." She whipped out her phone and began snapping photos, muttering about visual pollution and neighborhood standards. Then she turned to me with a smile. "So cold, it could sour cream. Mark Sullivan, I hope you're prepared to face thousands in fines, daily fines, till this eyesore is gone." What Patricia didn't know was that this so-called eyesore was the only way my son would be able to come home again. I'm Mark Sullivan, and I've lived in my home on Maple Ridge Drive for more than 2 decades. My wife and I bought it after getting married back when the community was still being built. I worked as a construction supervisor for most of my life, until I took early retirement to focus on something far more important. Preparing for my son Kyle's return, Kyle enlisted in the military right after high school, following the legacy of his grandfather and great-grandfather. He was always the kind of kid who wanted to make a difference, who believed in service and sacrifice. He completed 3 deployments in Afghanistan and was finally set to return home for good that Christmas. But instead of a homecoming celebration, I received the call every military parent dreads: a roadside bomb, critical condition, flown to Germany, then transferred to Walter Reed. The doctors saved his life, but not his legs. For months I worked to prepare our home for Kyle's arrival. I widened doorways, added grab bars, renovated the bathroom. But the ramp was most important, a simple, well-built incline from the driveway to the front door. Just sturdy lumber, weather-treated too. Matched the house, equipped with proper rails and a non-slip surface. It wasn't flashy, but it gave Kyle the freedom to enter his childhood home without help. Apparently, that wasn't enough for Patricia Drummond. She had moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago and immediately launched a campaign for HOA president, promising to preserve neighborhood standards. What that really meant was micromanaging every detail of every property and turning a peaceful community into her personal kingdom. Armed with a tape measure and a rule book, she stalked our streets like a hall monitor with too much power. "This ramp exceeds the allowed porch dimensions," she declared, measuring each board like she was auditioning for a role on a courtroom drama. "It alters the front aesthetic of the home and therefore requires a full review, which takes 6 to 8 weeks at minimum." "Patricia," I said evenly, tamping down the frustration rising in my chest, "my son is coming home from the hospital next week. He needs this ramp." She waved off my words with a flick of her hand. "Personal circumstances don't outweigh HOA rules, Mr. Sullivan. You should have thought of that before starting unauthorized work. I'll be filing a formal violation. Expect a cease and desist by Monday." The construction foreman stepped in. "Ma'am, this ramp meets all federal accessibility codes." He pulled the proper city permits. "City permits don't mean a thing here," she snapped. "This is HOA territory. Our rules go beyond local codes." She turned to me again. "If construction doesn't stop immediately, the fines will start at $500 per day." Strutted off, clipboard clutched tight. Neighbors had begun to emerge, many watching from behind windows or over hedges. I saw sympathy in some expressions, hesitation in others. People feared Patricia. But I wasn't about to back down, not when my son had given up so much for this country. The next few days, Patricia launched a full-blown crusade. Daily violation notices arrived at my doorstep, each one more dramatic than the last. Emergency. Board meetings were called where she ranted about precedent and community degradation. Her husband, a personal injury lawyer, sent a letter claiming the ramp posed a liability issue. I responded with documentation at compliance certificates, city-issued permits, letters from Kyle's doctors. Patricia dismissed it all with her favorite line, HOA rules supersede everything else. She even took to the neighborhood Facebook page, posting unflattering photos of the ramp with captions like, "Today it's one ramp, tomorrow our property values plummet." But Patricia had miscalculated. She assumed the community would fall in line behind her, like always. She didn't anticipate the silent group of veterans living among us, or the parents who knew what it meant to wait anxiously for a child too. Come home from deployment. The morning of Kyle's arrival, I found my lawn lined with miniature American flags. Eddie, my elderly neighbor and a Vietnam veteran, tied yellow ribbons around my mailbox. "Heard your boy's coming home," he said. "Figured he deserved a welcome." By midday, the ramp was covered in handmade signs. "Welcome home, Kyle. A hero lives here." Neighbors brought food, offered to help. I was adjusting one of the signs when I heard those familiar heels again. Patricia returned, this time with a thick manila envelope. "Mr. Sullivan," she said tightly, "this cease and desist order is signed by the board. The ramp must be removed within 72 hours, or we will take legal action." "Patricia, come on," said Janet Morrison from across the street. "His son is a wounded veteran. Can't you show a little heart?" "Compassion doesn't preserve property values," Patricia snapped. "This ramp is 4 inches wider than allowed and extends 18 inches too far. It's an eyesore and a violation." She didn't see the van pull into my driveway. Kyle stepped out, upright and poised in his crisp uniform. He unfolded his wheelchair and transferred himself with precision. The crowd went silent as he wheeled up the ramp with ease, turned, and addressed everyone. "Hi, I'm Kyle Sullivan. I understand there's been some concern about this ramp." Patricia went pale, clutching the cease and desist like it might save her. "This doesn't change anything," she stammered. "Rules are rules, ma'am," Kyle said, his voice calm and steady. 3 months ago, I was on patrol in Kandahar. A bomb took my legs and the lives of 2 friends. This ramp isn't about bending rules, it's about being able to enter my father's house without needing to be carried like a child. The silence that followed was profound, till Eddie began clapping. One by one, others joined in, until the entire street was filled with applause. Patricia floundered, desperate for control. "You still should have followed procedures. There are rules," "You're right," Kyle said. "There are rules. Like the Americans with Disabilities Act, which says people like me have a right to reasonable access. And threatening to remove that could be a federal offense." "I call for an emergency HOA meeting," Janet said. 7 o'clock tonight. Seconded. Came several voices at once. That night, the community center was packed like never before. Kyle showed up in his dress uniform. "I've faced worse than a suburban HOA," he joked. Patricia tried to control the narrative, but neighbors weren't having it. Veterans spoke about sacrifice. Realtors brought research showing accessibility improvements actually raised property values. Margaret Chen revealed a file with over 200 violation notices issued by Patricia in the past. 18 months, most of which were bogus and later withdrawn. When board member Robert Davidson called for a vote to remove Patricia, nearly every hand in the room went up, except hers. She was also stripped of the power to block accessibility modifications. Refunds for past violations were ordered. When she threatened legal action, someone quietly mentioned her husband's checkered legal past. The next morning, city code enforcement arrived at her house. Turns out, her backyard gazebo had several violations of its own $8,000 in fines. Within a week, her house had a for sale sign in the yard. 2 weeks later, she was gone. That ramp, it became a symbol. Decorated for holidays, surrounded by chalk drawings and thank you notes. What Patricia had called an eyesore became a monument to what truly matters. The last time I saw her, she was arguing with a grocery store manager about cart placement. Some people never change, but our neighborhood had. With Patricia gone, the HOA focused on real problems improvements, community, events, and helping neighbors. And Kyle? He started college that fall, studying civil engineering. "If I can make one person's life easier," he told me, "then losing my legs meant something." I look at that ramp now and smile. Built to last, just like the spirit of the neighbors who stood together for what was right.